Davy, and I'm awesome. And welcome to Davy's Awesome Movies, where I review styles of movies I love, the alternative B-rated cult-style flicks. This week, I'm reviewing one of my favorite movies growing up. This movie was made in 1985. This movie was written and directed by Jonathan Lynn, and co-written by John Landis, and based on the Parker Brothers board game Clue by Anthony E. Pratt, and produced by Deborah Hill. Made by Gruber Peters Company, Polygram Pictures, and Deborah Hill Productions, and distributed by Paramount Pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, not only one of my favorite movies, but favorite board games, Clue. The movie takes place in New England in 1954, and it opens with a man named Wadsworth, played by Tim Curry. He is getting a dinner party ready for some special guests. The first guest is Colonel Mustard, played by Martin Mull. And he's also being informed, and therefore us being informed, that not only he, but every guest that will be there tonight is being given an alias, and they're going to want that alias. Next is Mrs. White, played by the legendary actress Madeline Kahn. Rest in peace. And she is being introduced to Yvette, the maid, played by Colleen Camp.
I see you know each other.
Oh, they do. Then on to Miss Scarlet and Professor Plum. Miss Scarlet's car broke down. Professor Plum picked her up, and it turns out they're going to the same place.
I got a letter like this.
Professor Plum is played by Christopher Lloyd, whereas Miss Scarlet is played by Leslie Ann Warren.
And this is Mrs. Peacock.
Played by Eileen Brennan. So now we got one more character.
Oh, you must be Mr. Green. Yeah. Sit! Not you, sir.
Played by Michael McKean. And of course, soon after Mr. Green shows up, we get Plum and Scarlet.
Dinner.
Well, that's one way to make an announcement. At dinner, Mrs. Peacock is enjoying the food.
This is one of my favorite recipes.
I know, madam.
Looks like biscuits and gravy. It's not. It turns out they all work in Washington, D.C.
Wadsworth, where's our host and why we've been brought here?
That's probably the answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mr. Body?
No one wants dessert, except me, so they all go to the study for coffee and brandy. I'm all set. Mr. Body doesn't want coffee or brandy, he just wants to make a run for it. But all the doors are locked and all the windows have bars. As far as any other place that might be vulnerable, well, they're taken care of too. So now we get to why they're here.
Ladies and gentlemen, you all have one thing in common. You're all being blackmailed.
Also, they all love board games. Wadsworth starts in on why they're all being blackmailed, starting with Professor Plum, who lost his license to practice psychiatry.
You know what doctors aren't allowed to do with their lady patients?
Yeah?
Well, he did.
And if his current job at the UN finds out about this, he would be fired. Mrs. Peacock took bribes.
In return for delivering your husband, Senator Peacock's vote to certain lobbyists.
Illegal! Miss Scarlet admits to what she's being blackmailed for. She runs a brothel in Washington, D.C.
What's the phone number?
My brother. Colonel Mustard is being blackmailed for selling military secrets, and Mrs. White is being blackmailed for the mysterious deaths of her husbands. Mr. Green decides he doesn't want to be unmasked, he's going to do it himself. Tells them why he's being blackmailed.
I work for the State Department, and I'm a homosexual.
Keep in mind this takes place in 1954. That would have got him fired and ruined his life. So don't get mad about it, just be happy that we've come such a long way. Now what about Mr. Body?
He's the one who's blackmailing you all.
I think they covered that dun 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 with the lightning, but okay. Wadsworth set all this up so that everybody could come out in the open, come clean, and report Mr. Body to the authorities. But Mr. Body has gifts for everybody. A candlestick, rope, lead pipe, wrench, gun, and a knife. All the weapons of the board game. Although in some versions of the board game they also have poison. Mr. Body tells them that the point of the weapons is to kill Wadsworth. If they kill him, they can go on with their lives. Still being blackmailed, but go on with their lives. If they don't kill him, Mr. Body will be arrested, and he'll report them all. So Mr. Body shuts off the light. But Wadsworth was not shot.
He's dead!
What?
Yeah, that was a stupid plan, because with you dead, they're not being blackmailed, and nobody is being exposed. Which means it was Professor Plum in the study with the revolver.
Somebody tried to grab the gun from me in the dark and the gun went off!
Crap! Either way, there is actually no bullet hole in him. So how did he die?
Maybe he was poisoned!
That's not one of the weapons in this version. After they get Mrs. Peacock to calm down, They charge into the billiard room, where Yvette is, alone.
I also drink the cognac, mon Dieu.
She's so convincing as a French woman. Wadsworth explains that the reason it was important to him to do this is because he and his wife were being blackmailed into being his slaves until his wife committed suicide.
She had friends who were socialists.
This was during the time of the McCarthy hearings, and that was enough to ruin somebody. But now they need to figure out who did it because they're all saying they didn't. Things are starting to cook.
The cook!
When they find the cook, she takes a stab at convincing him that she didn't do it.
I didn't do it!
But somebody else had already made that point. Colonel Mustard thinks it must have been Mrs. White, even berates her into admitting that she had 5 husbands.
Husband should be like Kleenex. Soft, strong, and disposable.
And loaded with boogers. They decide to take the cook's body into the study. And when they get there, they find a surprise.
The body's gone!
Someone has taken Mr. Body's body! You could call him a body snatcher!
Maybe he wasn't dead.
Well, that's a possibility. Not anymore. Until they can figure out who did this, Wadsworth suggests that they lock the weapons into a cupboard and go throw away the key. But when they go to do that, there is a motorist at the door. He is there asking if he could use the phone, because down the road his car died. They take the motorist to the lounge so he can use the phone, and Wadsworth decides that for his own safety, he's going to lock him into the lounge, and then throw away the key, as he tried to do before the motorist showed up. Colonel Mustard suggests that what they need to do is they need to get into pairs, and they need to go search the rest of the house in case there's somebody else they don't know about. So they draw locks to decide who's going to be paired with who. After they get paired up and as they're searching, someone unlocks the cupboard that has all the weapons, and they sneak into the lounge where the motorist is making his phone call.
And one of them is my old boss from...
You should have given 2 weeks' notice. When Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet, who are paired up, find the motorist...
Oh my God!
They freak!
Let us in! Let us in! Let us out! Let us out!
Let us pray. Yvette has a plan. Not a good one. She does shoot the lock, though, and let them out.
I can't take any more scares.
Good thing he was wearing brown pants. As they're trying to figure out how the cupboard of weapons got open in the first place, there's a knock at the door.
I found an abandoned car down near the gates of this house.
The cop wants to use the phone as well, so they take him to the library and lock him in. That was freaky. He demands them to open up and asks why they locked him in.
And why are you receiving phone calls from J. Edgar Hoover?
'Cause he's a drag. Mr. Green takes the cop around and shows him the rooms where nothing's happening, but the cop wants to see inside the study. And of course, Mr. Green says he can't.
Because it's all too shocking.
Just like you're overacting.
Life could be a dream if I could take you.
Ew.
I mean, smart, but gross. And the motorist?
He won't be driving home, officer, I promise you that.
No.
Fair enough. Since the cop is now satisfied, he wants to use the phone again. And they take him to it, and lock him in again, and go searching again. And they find more secret passageways. Which I want a house with secret passageways. I'd use them to scare the crap out of my family. But as everybody is still searching... What? Am I supposed to be afraid of the dark? I'm not Canadian. Yvette sneaks into a room where a mysterious voice asks if anybody has recognized her.
They must have, and not just my face.
She's not French!
It's you!
Never mind that! You're not French! Triggered! Not only is Yvette strangled to death, but in the other room, somebody's using the lead pipe on the cop. And in the midst of all this, there is a knock at the door.
I am your singing telegram.
Even though she just got there, it was time for her to go-go. She was in the band, the Go-Go's. And, most of you are probably too young to remember that band. And those of you who are not too young to remember that band, you just don't want to remember that band. Like, you do remember that band, but you definitely wish those memories could take a vacation.
Dude, shut up!
Yeah, okay, I'll stop now. The lights come back on and everybody goes out and finds all the new victims. Which I do gotta say, the game clue might have been a lot better had there been some more people other than Mr. Body dying. They also go to the front door and find the singing telegram girl.
This is getting serious.
Getting serious? It wasn't serious when there was 1, 2, or even 3 deaths? Took 6 for this to get serious? But now Wadsworth has come to a conclusion.
I know who did it.
Remember, you gotta get all 3 right. The location, the weapon, the murderer, or you lose. Does anybody else think it's a little strange that a child's board game was based on a murder? I mean, we got away with it way back then, but I feel like nowadays, parents would have had a big uproar until they made it about you're finding out who stole the ice cream. And this is why your generation sucks. Wadsworth says that in order for them to tell him who did it and why, he has to replay every incident as it happened. Which, no, you don't. You could just tell them. But, you know what? Who cares? This is way more fun.
And you'd had a letter, and you'd had a letter, and you'd had a letter.
Get out of it!
I would be annoyed if I were them. But since I'm not them, I'm just watching them. I'm entertained.
Everybody switch out the lights!
Ah! He finally reaches a conclusion in the billiard room.
But one of us wasn't here.
Guess who? Sorry, wrong board game. Instead, he reveals that Yvette and the cook were informants for Mr. Body, so that he could blackmail Miss Scarlet, Colonel Mustard, and Mrs. White. Because Yvette worked for Miss Scarlet, had an affair with Mrs. White's husband, and, Colonel Mustard was a client.
You all had a motive.
Okay, but who did it? I mean, don't you want to win this game? I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. So Wadsworth continues reenacting the whole thing.
Do it! Will you stop that? No.
When they get to the motorist, Wadsworth informs him that it was not a coincidence that he showed up when he did. He was invited, just like the others.
Everyone who has died gave him vital information about one of you.
The motorist was Colonel Mustard's driver during the war.
He knew that I was a war profiteer.
The cop was being bribed by Miss Scarlet to look the other way of her brothel.
Oh my God.
What about the singing telegram girl?
She was my patient once. I had an affair with her.
After they move her body inside, Wadsworth decides to get on with it.
And then the doorbell rang.
Yeah, that was also freaky.
Have you ever given any thought to the kingdom of heaven?
They should. They very rarely tell him to leave, and Wadsworth goes back to reenacting. Wadsworth switches off all the lights for a second.
Hate when he does that.
Okay, that clip wasn't really important, but I couldn't leave it out because that random Madeline Kahn scream always made me laugh. Finally, Wadsworth names the killer.
Yvette.
Yvette!
Yvette? Wadsworth mentions that Yvette was always out of the room when a killing was going on. She was the only one that was not with them all the time. But why would she do this?
Was it because she was acting under orders?
Could be, but who ordered it?
It was her employer, Miss Scarlet.
That's a lie.
After going through how Miss Scarlet killed the motorist, the cop, and then Yvette, he has a way to prove it. The gun is the only weapon that is still missing, so whoever has it must be the killer.
Brilliantly worked out, Wadsworth. I congratulate you.
Good job, you won! Maybe. Miss Scarlet explains that this was all to get secrets on all of them, because the brothel is only her secondary job. Her first job is secrets. She deals in them. She's going to use it against them. However, Wadsworth has no value, so she's going to shoot him. But he's not afraid, because him doing the math shows there's no more bullets in the gun. She says there is.
Even if you were right, that would be 1 + 1 + 2 + 1, not 1 + 2 + 1 + 1.
Everybody got that? Good! But just as she's about to use her final bullet, the police arrive. They had help from Wadsworth. This was all set up. Miss Scarlet does apologize for trying to shoot him, but Wadsworth says he doesn't care, because there was no more bullets in the gun.
You see?
How awkward. Seriously, somebody get that man a new pair of pants. However, that's not the real ending. So now we go to what could have been the real ending. So, who really did it?
You murdered them all.
Mrs. Peacock? Wadsworth explains the big giveaway was during dinner when she mentioned that that was one of her favorite recipes. Which means at one point that must have been her cook because what they were eating were monkey brains, which is very popular in China but not so popular in Washington, D.C.
Is that what we ate?
Oh, you liked it, so get over it. Again, the big reveal though is who has the gun.
Very well.
When you think about it, her being the killer makes no sense. But whatever, it's Mrs. Peacock, so it's over. And right as she's leaving, they agree that they're going to stack the bodies in the cellar and quietly leave. Nobody's going to say nothing because they all have secrets on each other. But once Mrs. Peacock gets outside...
Take your hands off me! I'm the senator's wife!
The reason they didn't show her saying that, only to the voiceover, was because they originally filmed it as he shot Mrs. Peacock and she died, but they decided they didn't want to do that, so they just edited it to make it look like she was just taken away by the police. But it turns out that wasn't the real ending either. So we go to the real ending. Finally! I need to know! Like you think you have a monopoly on suspense? Wadsworth gets into the murders. Professor Plum obviously killed Mr. Body. Took him 2 attempts. Mrs. Peacock killed the cook. Colonel Mustard killed the motorist. Mrs. White killed Yvette over her insane jealousy of Yvette sleeping with her ex-husband. She hated Yvette so much.
Flames on the side of my face.
That part was all ad-libbed by Madeline Kahn. So that means Mr. Green must have been the one that shot the singing telegram girl.
I shot her.
But you're not even a character in the game.
You're Mr. Body.
A what? So who did Professor Plum kill?
My butler.
Basically, Mr. Body, as Wadsworth, used them all to get rid of his network of spies so that he could not be implicated in anything. But he can continue blackmailing them. Where'd he get the gun?
FBI. That phone call from J. Edgar Hoover was for me.
So now, the police come in and of course they ask who did it. And Mr. Green informs them they all did it. As far as who killed Mr. Body...
I did. In the hall. With the revolver.
So now we have the game ending. Location, weapon, person.
I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife.
Now we need a movie for Hungry Hungry Hippos. So there you have it. That's the awesome, best movie based on a board game ever, Clue. The movie didn't have immediate success, as it had a $15 million budget and did $14.6 million in the box office. However, it's very much made its money back since then through DVD and VHS sales. It quickly gained a cult following. In fact, it mostly has good reviews. For example, on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it a 69%, meaning most of them like it. The audience have an 86%, meaning most of them like it. There was originally a 4th ending filmed where it would have turned out that Wadsworth was the one that actually killed everybody, because since he couldn't be the perfect husband or butler, he would become the perfect murderer. But they decided to scrap that, and good idea. Some of the casting, though, almost went completely different. For example, Leslie Ann Warren was not who was supposed to play Miss Scarlet. Originally, that part was supposed to go to Carrie Fisher. But a few days before filming, Carrie Fisher entered into rehab because of her drug and alcohol abuse. And it later went to Leslie Ann Warren. Honestly, I think Leslie Ann Warren did a much better job than Carrie Fisher would have. The first choice for Wadsworth was an actor named Leonard Rossier, but he died before filming could take place. Their second choice was Roman Atkinson, Mr. Bean, but the executive producers didn't want that because he wasn't very well known in America at that time, so they wanted somebody that was more known. Enter Tim Curry. Now, Rowan Atkinson probably could have done a great job, but I think Tim Curry did knock it out of the park. In fact, to this day, Tim Curry says this is one of the favorite parts he's ever played. The director, Jonathan Lynn, though, after this went on to direct some awesome movies. He was the director of My Cousin Vinny, The Whole Nine Yards, Greedy. I know most people would be surprised I put Greedy in the same category, but if you've seen that, it's an awesome movie. However, when the movie first came out, if you saw it in theaters, you only saw one of the 3 endings. They did that on purpose. Each theater was given one ending. And they did this because co-writer John Landis thought it'd be a great way to get people to go to different theaters and see the movie again and again and again to see all 3 endings. It backfired, though, because whereas people liked it, they didn't like it so much that they were willing to go spend more money to see the entire movie with a few minute difference. They just waited until the VHS came out, which had all 3 endings. Nowadays, if you have a DVD or Blu-ray, you can either see all 3 endings at the same time, or you can do a feature where you select that it's going to show you one ending. One of the cool things about this movie, in my opinion, is how true it was to the board game. For example, every secret passageway in this movie leads to the same room it would lead to in the game. Not to mention, another little detail, every character's car was the same color as their character. Basically, though, all the cool facts set aside, the movie itself is just a really fun movie. It is funny, it is incredibly well casted. Like I said, it's one of my favorite movies growing up. Watched this movie many times to the point that I could quote the entire movie. I loved it that much. My brother and I would watch it every time it came on until we finally got our parents to buy us a VHS copy. So on that note, if you haven't seen Clue, then do yourself a favor and see Clue. Then afterwards, celebrate and play the board game. So there you have it. That's my movie review this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit like and subscribe, hit that little bell so you get notifications when I post the videos, and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of Clue, the board game or the movie. Love you guys.